to unlock green energy too. So say mining companies who want to plough the depths of the world's oceans in the search for rare metals. A 2-year moratorium on mining has now expired. The world's maritime nations have been meeting in Jamaica to decide what to do. Scientists say there are snow white lobsters and sponges made of glass to be explored on the seabed. And what else may be there? Is the threat to them worth the bigger prize? Can we have green energy yet also save the microclimate which dwells beneath us? If the impacts of climate change are already with us, what difference will stirring up the sediment make to higher sea temperatures, rising tides and the islands set to vanish beneath? That's the real story coming up after the news.
Hello, I'm Moira Alderson with the BBC News. The United Nations says almost 300 children are estimated to have died or disappeared this year whilst attempting to cross the Mediterranean Sea from North Africa to Europe. The new report by the UN Children's Agency said the true number is impossible to verify. Caroline Hawley reports.
No one knows the true number of deaths at sea. Some boats sink without trace. But the UN says the central Mediterranean is the deadliest migration route in the world, and many of those making the journey are under 18, most of them without their parents. UNICEF believes that a fifth of those who've died or gone missing over the past few years have been children. It's calling for more safe and legal routes for them to claim asylum and for better efforts to rescue people at sea. And it says much more needs to be done to address what's causing so many children to leave their home countries, risking their lives trying to reach Europe.
America's film and television business is stopping today as tens of thousands of Hollywood actors join writers in a strike. It's the first industry-wide walkout for more than 6 decades and will also affect productions outside the United States. This report from Peter Bowes.
Almost all US film and television productions will come to a halt immediately, wherever in the world they're being made. Actors will join writers on picket lines outside the main studios during what many fear will be a hugely painful and possibly long-running strike. The two sides appear to be far apart on the key issues: a new structure for residual payments or repeat fees, with the streaming services posing new challenges for actors. There's also no agreement on the use of artificial intelligence, where an actor's likeness could be digitally recreated.
The Indian Space Agency is making final preparations for the launch of a rocket that will attempt to land a rover on the Moon. The Chandrayaan-3 spacecraft will go into orbit before deploying a lander near the south pole of the Moon. Arunodaya Mukherjee has the details.
There is excitement in this small coastal island of Sriharikota, where a rocket stands tall, waiting to be fired up into the sky. A soft landing on the lunar surface will mean India will now be among the few countries like the US, China and Russia to have achieved the feat. Once it lands on the southern pole of the Moon, a rover will be deployed for research. It happens to be the same area where India's first moon mission 15 years ago discovered the possible presence of water.
There have been further Russian drone attacks on Ukraine overnight. The Ukrainian authorities say they shot down 16 of 17 Iranian-made explosive drones. But the authorities in the central city of Kryvyi Rih say a number of buildings were damaged and a man was injured in a strike there. World News from the BBC. The United States has experienced its worst 6 months of mass killings since records began almost 2 decades ago. Since January, there have been 28 mass killings, defined as when 4 or more people are killed over a short space of time. The International Criminal Court has opened a new investigation into alleged war crimes in the Darfur region of Sudan. Ethnic violence has surged there as part of the conflict between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary RSF. Reports included attacks on civilians, mass rapes and the burnings of homes and markets. Charlene Petitjean from the charity Solidarité International described what she found in Al Geneina, the capital city of Western Darfur.
The city now is almost all destroyed, so when you arrived in Geneina, so all the first part of the city, the west part, is empty. So basically you have no one, there is no noise at all in the city. You can find people in the more northeast areas. There is no water, there is no food, all the markets were burned.
Investigators in Singapore have issued an arrest notice for one of the city-state's richest people in connection with a probe into high-level corruption. The billionaire hotelier Ong Beng Seng hasn't been charged, but he's been asked about his interactions with Singapore's Transport Minister S. Iswaran, who took leave from his ministerial job this week. Singapore is consistently ranked in surveys as one of the world's least corrupt countries, and such inquiries involving government ministers are rare. China says it's executed a former nursery teacher who killed a child and made 24 others ill by poisoning their porridge. Wang Yun had unsuccessfully appealed against the death sentence imposed on her nearly 3 years ago in the central province of Henan. She was found to have added sodium nitrate to the breakfast of a fellow teacher's pupils after a dispute, causing one child to die of multiple organ failure. BBC News.
This is The Real Story from the BBC. I'm Sean Lay with your weekly deep dive into a story that's making news and changing lives. And it is the deepest possible dive this week to the bottom of the ocean. For millennia, the deepest, darkest abyss of the ocean remained untouched, yet teeming with life and rich in rare earth metals.
So this is what the mining companies are after. This is a polymetallic nodule. It's a kind of nugget of crucial battery metals. So in here you've got cobalt, nickel, copper, manganese, and there are hundreds of millions of these lying on the deep sea floor.
Now the pressure is on to open up those waters for deep sea mining. The precious metals can help feed the green technology revolution.
We've woken up to the fact that to decarbonize is going to be very metal intensive. So the question is, where are we going to get those metals from? And what we should be focusing our mind on is where we can get them with the lightest environmental touch and the lightest impact on humans.
The International Seabed Authority meeting in Jamaica is scheduled to complete its discussions next week. It could give the green light for mining to begin thereafter. Some fear that could be an ecological disaster.
This is strip mining. Let's not kid ourselves. These resources will be gone, and they aren't coming back in any kind of timescale that humanity is interested in. And with that, this habitat will be gone too.
A habitat we still know so little about.
This particular area of the Pacific, 5,000 different species, the vast majority of which we've never seen before. They're unknown to science.
Yet environmentalists are among those arguing most passionately that the threat from global warming is the greatest the world faces. To leave behind the carbon economy requires batteries to hold the electric power and to store renewable energy for use later.
There's a big transition going on for electric cars, electric appliances. For all this electric, we need batteries, and cobalt is the most powerful battery at this point in time. And there's a lot of it in the ocean.
So is this a necessary step in the journey towards cleaner, greener technology? Does climate change pose a bigger risk to our oceans than mining would? If this delicate ecosystem is destroyed, can it be restored, or is it lost forever? Deep sea mining, cure for climate change or ecological catastrophe? So in the next hour, we're going to tease out the environmental, economic and political threads of the search for rare metals. Helping us this week, the Real Story panel are Pierre Josso, minerals geoscientist at the British Geological Survey. He's joining us today from France. And here in the studio are Helen Chersky, physicist and oceanographer at University College London, author of Blue.
And I think the point to make here is whether it be 15, 16, 17% of very little is not very much.
Fair enough. Well, listen, thanks so much for joining us today, Dominic. We really appreciate you jumping on quickly after announcing this action. The news there from the Unite Union that there will be 8 days of strike from around 1,000 ground staff and related jobs at Gatwick, coming in 2 stints, 4 days later this month, 4 days early August. Well, coming up later this hour here on Sky News Today with Wilfred Frost, a special report on missing pupils. That's at 10:30 this morning, also at 12:30, and then again later this afternoon, 3:30 and 6:30 this evening. Well, to the US now, and Hollywood actors are joining screenwriters on the picket line, sparking an industry-wide shutdown and a row about pay and the impact of artificial intelligence. The strike comes after the union, which represents around 160,000 members of the industry in Hollywood studios, failed to reach an agreement on a fairer split of profits and increased safeguarding around AI rights. Well, our US correspondent Martha Kellner has the latest for us.
There's no shortage of support for the strikers here. And this resistance is about to swell in size. Hollywood's writers, who have been treading these pavements for 2 months now, are being joined by the actors who bring their words to life.
We'll figure it out. I feel like we're a resilient bunch, and LA is a union town, and we're going to go as far as we need. I feel like it's war. Honestly, I feel like it's war. You hear me? It's war!
A dual strike hasn't happened since 1960. It will bring the TV and film industry to a grinding halt. How long are you willing to be out of work for?
As long as it takes. You chose the wrong group to mess with in terms of not being employed, because we're good at this.
Negotiations with production companies broke down over royalty payments, which actors say are pitiful. They also fear the rise of artificial intelligence taking away jobs. The union president announced the strike.
We are the victims here. We are being victimized by a very greedy entity. I am shocked by the way the people that we have been in business with are treating us. I cannot believe it.
At the Oppenheimer premiere in London, actors like Cillian Murphy and Emily Blunt walked out as news of the strike was confirmed. The traditional production studios and the streaming giants like Netflix and Amazon say that they put a fair deal on the table and that actors' demands were unrealistic. The two sides seem further away than ever. Hollywood is still recovering from the pandemic and an economic crisis. It will now be a case of who blinks first. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Hollywood.
Well, shortly before the action was announced last night, the stars of historical epic Oppenheimer staged a walkout from the film's London premiere in solidarity with union members. Here's what some of the big names had to say as they were just leading up to that red carpet walkout.
Definitely want to talk about it while we still can, and if we go on strike, we'll pack up and go home.
So we're in complete solidarity with our side colleagues, so we will be with them, with our fellows. I'm a 33-year member of the guild, so I think this is a critical moment, and they're working super hard to try and reach an agreement, a fair one for everybody. There's an existential threat to, the industry that needs to be addressed. It's being addressed. It's a painful process, but it has to be done.
Well, we won't be able to promote the film further than this, but it's, that's the way the cookie crumbles.
Well, we're here. We're ready to show the film, and we have an incredible cast who feel very strongly they want to promote the film. But with an impending strike, we're just trying to do what we can before whatever happens.
Interestingly, the Directors Guild haven't striked, but the writers and the actors have. We'll be discussing that more later in the show. Now, for the first time, Sky News can reveal the total number of hours MPs are committing to work outside of representing their constituents, and which MPs make the most per hour. The average hourly wage for an MP in a second job is more than 17 times the average for a member of the UK public. Our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, has the details.
What should politicians do with their time?
Ban all second jobs for MPs.
I don't have any objection to MPs having an insight into the outside world.
Second jobs divide MPs and often anger their voters.
You get paid best part of 90 grand a year, that should be enough.
We voted them in to run this country, so that's what they should do.
Sky News' Westminster Accounts project has followed the money through our political system. Now we reveal the scale of MPs' commitment to their second jobs.
For the first time, we can show you the total of how much time MPs say they spend on their outside work. Nearly 89,000 hours. That's the total amount of time all MPs have worked in second jobs over the course of this Parliament, so 3.5 years. Let's see how it all breaks down. These are the MPs who commit the most hours to their second jobs. Now, some names in there you might recognise. Sir Geoffrey Cox. They've become notorious for their commitment to outside work, but most have one thing in common. All the names on this list have second jobs in politics. Councillors, mayors, members of the Scottish Parliament. Double political jobbing keeping them very busy. And something else we can show you for the very first time. This is the average hourly wage of an MP in a second job. £233 per hour. How does that compare to the rest of the population? Well, it's a lot higher. The average hourly wage for an MP in a second job is over 17 times the average rate for a member of the UK public, and more than 22 times the minimum hourly wage. Which MPs are getting the most cash for the hours they work? This leaderboard shows you that. These 20 MPs have the highest hourly rates in Parliament. The name at the top is no surprise. Boris Johnson, now free to spend even more time earning big bucks away from Westminster. The second name on this list is the shortest-lived PM in British history. But that has hardly dented earnings power. Liz Truss. Her most lucrative work since leaving number 10 has been a speech in Taiwan, paid at a rate of £20,000 an hour, nearly 1,500 times the UK average hourly wage for her insights into global diplomacy. And that's part of a very common pattern. MPs who've served in government dominate this leaderboard. 18 of the MPs with the highest hourly earnings this Parliament have government experience. Clearly, a very lucrative addition to any parliamentarian's CV.
Plans for major second job reforms have frozen in this Parliament. Is it just a matter of time until voters force a change? Sam Coates, Sky News.
Well, our Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates does join me live now from Westminster, and as ever, some amazing analysis from the Westminster account stuff, Sam. Clearly, those numbers are striking when you look at the sort of wages per hour and some of the headline amounts. I wonder in total take-home pay how the amounts differ. Do most MPs make more per year on the outside than they do on the inside? And has that really changed over the last couple of decades? Because we can all be very shocked about it now that this tool is available from Sky to analyse it. But equally, if they've all been doing it for a while and it's kind of the norm and they're attracted into the job based on being able to earn these sort of sums, then I guess it's harder to argue that it's totally in the wrong.
So I think one of the most striking things from the data analysis that we did as part of the Westminster account is that there are effectively a small number of MPs at the top who are earning the sort of mega bucks. Now, those are, in many cases, some of the most famous household names, the former Prime Ministers, the Boris Johnsons, of course, no longer an MP, Theresa May, Liz Truss. They're on the global speaking circuit, and that's where you can make the highest sums, along with barrister Geoffrey Cox. Now, I think it's that kind of tiptoeing towards the sort of higher end of the speaker's circuit that is perhaps different to what we saw 10, 20, 30 years ago. But what's interesting is that talking to MPs, they like to imply that there is just this sort of cadre, this group of MPs at the very top who are pushing up the average salary. And that is true to a certain extent. Listen here to the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, making that point this morning.
The reality is that's probably a small number of people who are doing, speeches on the speaker's circuit who are getting paid an awful lot. And yes, this is permitted and they have to go through all the rules from Parliament and it's something that's permitted. But I know that I'm not contributing to that average.
But that's only true to a certain extent, Will. We've done quite a lot of data analysis. So as you saw in that report, the average, every single MP's second earnings divided by the number that have a second job,